"Sir, can you bury my sister?" Little alien boy whispered. What the human did next changed everything. The border world had no real name anymore. On old star maps it still carried a code, a number with letters behind it, but no one used that now. People just called it the processing world. Ships came, ships left. Lives were counted, scanned, sorted, and moved like cargo. The sky was always gray, not from storms but from dust and burned atmosphere. The war had passed through the system months ago, fast and clean by military standards, brutal by every other measure. Cities had fallen in hours. Supply lines collapsed. Those who survived gathered where the coalition told them to gather and waited for instructions that came slowly, if they came at all. Rows of temporary shelters stretched across the plains, metal frames, fabric walls, lights that hummed all night. Coalition drones floated above the camp, watching silently. Alien soldiers stood at checkpoints, their armor clean, their faces unreadable. Humans were rare here. The coalition allowed them mostly for logistics and relief work. Humans were efficient, adaptable, and cheap compared to advanced automation. That was how the coalition saw them. Elias Carter stood near the edge of the camp, reviewing a data pad that showed supply numbers he already knew by heart. Food was short. Medical supplies were shorter. Requests kept piling up and approvals came back delayed or denied. He rubbed his eyes and looked up at the camp. He had been here 3 weeks. It felt longer. Most refugees avoided eye contact, not out of fear of him but because hope was exhausting. Hope hurt when it failed. As the artificial lights flickered on for the night cycle, Elias noticed movement beyond the main paths. A small shape, slow and unsteady, heading toward the perimeter fence. He frowned and stepped away from his station. The shape was a child. The boy was not human. His skin had a faint blue-gray tone, dulled by dust. His ears were long and thin, torn slightly at the edges. He wore clothing meant for someone older, tied and folded to stay on his small frame. In his arms he carried a bundle wrapped in cloth. Elias slowed his steps. Children carrying things like that usually meant food scraps or personal items pulled from ruins. But this bundle did not move. The boy held it too carefully. "Hey," Elias said softly, keeping his voice low. "You shouldn't be out here alone." The boy stopped. His large eyes lifted, dark and reflective in the artificial light. He did not run. He did not step back. He just stood there, trembling slightly. Elias knelt to make himself smaller. "What's your name?" he asked. The boy hesitated. His grip tightened on the bundle. I am Kesh," he said, his voice thin and strained like it had not been used much lately. Elias nodded. "I'm Elias. Are you lost, Kesh?" Kesh shook his head slowly. His gaze dropped to the ground. "No," he whispered. "I am waiting." "For who?" Elias asked. Kesh swallowed. His eyes filled, but no tears fell. He had already cried them all out. "For you," the boy said. Elias felt a quiet chill run through him. "For me," Kesh nodded once. Then he took a small step forward, holding the bundle closer. "Sir," he whispered, "can you bury my sister?" The words landed heavier than any explosion Elias had heard during the war. He looked at the bundle again, really looked. The cloth was torn and stained. One small hand, thin and still, slipped out from the wrapping. Elias closed his eyes for a moment. He knew the rules. Everyone did. Coalition Directive 441. No personal burials, no graves. Bodies were to be collected daily, scanned, catalogued, and incinerated. Disease prevention, they said, resource management, emotional attachment discouraged, efficient, clean, inhuman. "How long?" Elias started, then stopped himself. He tried again. "How long has she been gone?" Kesh looked confused. "Gone," Elias nodded gently. "How long has she not been breathing?" Kesh thought. "Since the sun was high yesterday," he said. "She told me to keep walking." "Then she slept. I waited for her to wake up." Elias' chest tightened. "What was her name?" he asked. "Lyra," Kesh said immediately. "She was brave. She always stood in front of me." Elias reached out slowly. Kesh did not pull away. "I'm sorry," Elias said. "I'm very sorry, Kesh." Kesh looked up at him, hope flickering weakly. "Will you help me?" Elias looked toward the camp. He could already imagine the report: unauthorized burial, breach of protocol, possible disciplinary action, removal from duty, maybe worse. He looked back at the boy. "Yes," Elias said, "I will help you." Kesh's shoulders sagged as if he had been holding himself upright by pure will alone. He let out a sound that was almost a sob and leaned forward. Elias steadied him. "Thank you," Kesh whispered. They walked away from the camp, past the lights, past the hum of machines. Beyond the perimeter fence was open land, scarred by old impacts and abandoned trenches. The ground was dry but not dead. Elias carried Lyra when Kesh's arms finally gave out. She was light, too light. They stopped near a single living tree, its bark cracked but its leaves still green. It was rare life on a world like this. "This is good," Kesh said softly. "She liked trees." Elias nodded. He dug with his hands. There were tools in the camp, but he did not want attention. The soil was hard and his fingers bled, but he kept going. Kesh sat nearby, watching silently. When the hole was deep enough, Elias wrapped Lyra more carefully, adjusting the cloth so her face was peaceful. Kesh knelt and touched his sister's forehead. "You can rest now," he whispered. "The human said it is okay." Elias felt something break inside his chest. They lowered her into the ground together. Elias covered her gently, patting the soil flat. He placed a smooth stone at the head of the grave. "I don't know your customs," Elias said quietly, "but where I come from we remember the dead by saying their name." Kesh nodded. "Her name is Lyra," he said again, stronger this time. They stood there as the night deepened. Kesh eventually sat, leaning against the tree. Exhaustion finally claimed him. He fell asleep with his hand resting on the fresh earth. Elias stayed. He stayed when his shift officially ended. He stayed when a patrol drone hovered briefly and moved on. He stayed until the first light of artificial dawn crept across the plains. When Kesh woke, he looked around in panic, then relaxed when he saw Elias. "You stayed," the boy said. "Yes," Elias replied. "I said I would." Kesh nodded as if confirming something important. He stood and placed a small carved token at the grave. Then he looked at Elias. "Can I stay with you?" he asked. Elias did not answer right away. He knew the rules about unregistered minors. He also knew how often those rules failed children. "Yes," he said. "You can stay with me." They walked back to the camp together. People noticed. Whispers followed them, not about the human, about the grave, about the fact that someone had been buried, not burned. That night when Elias filed his report, he left one field blank. Cause of protocol deviation, compassion. He knew consequences would come. He also knew he would do it again. Far away, coalition systems logged a minor irregularity. They did not yet understand that something had changed. Morning came without warmth. The artificial sun lamps brightened the camp, turning gray dust into pale gold. The processing world woke slowly, like a tired animal that did not want to move anymore. Elias walked beside Kesh through the narrow paths between shelters. The boy stayed close, his small hand gripping the edge of Elias' jacket. He looked around with wide eyes, not afraid but alert, as if the world might suddenly take something else from him. People noticed them. It started with glances, then whispers. Refugees from many species paused their work or their waiting to watch the human and the small alien boy pass. Some recognized Kesh. Many had seen him before, always quiet, always carrying that bundle. Now the bundle was gone. A tall, scaled woman with tired yellow eyes stepped forward. "Is it true?" she asked Elias in broken trade language. "You buried the dead child." Elias did not slow down. "Yes," he said calmly. She looked shocked. "The coalition, I know the rules," Elias said. The woman stared at him for a long moment. Then she bowed her head slightly. "Thank you," she said and stepped aside. That was the first. By midday the camp felt different, not louder, Not happier, but less hollow, people spoke more. They shared food quietly. A few even laughed, short and surprised sounds like they had forgotten how. Kesh sat near Elia's workstation while Elias coordinated supply distribution. He gave the boy a ration bar and a cup of water. Kesh ate slowly, carefully, like he did not trust food to stay. "You can eat more," Elias said gently. Kesh shook his head. "Later," he said, "in case." Elias did not push him. A medical volunteer passed by, a human woman with dark circles under her eyes. She stopped when she saw Kesh. "New assignment?" she asked Elias. "Temporary," Elias replied. "He's with me." She crouched in front of Kesh. "What's your name?" "Kesh," he said. She smiled softly. "I'm Mara. If you feel sick or tired, you tell Elias, okay?" Kesh nodded. As she walked away, she leaned closer to Elias. "You know Command is going to hear about this," she murmured. "I know," Elias said. "You could be pulled out," she warned. "Or worse." Elias looked down at Kesh, who was watching a cargo drone with quiet fascination. "Then that's the price." By the second night, people began visiting the tree. Not openly, not all at once, one by one. Elias noticed small shapes near the grave when he went to check on it after his shift. Stones arranged in careful patterns, strips of cloth tied to the branches. A tiny metal ring placed at the base of the marker stone. He was not alone. An insect-like alien stood nearby, its thin limbs folded inward. It did not speak, only lowered its head toward the grave before walking away. Kesh watched silently. "They are saying goodbye," Kesh whispered. "Yes," Elias said. "They are." The coalition noticed too. On the third day, Elias was called into a temporary command shelter. 2 coalition officers waited inside. Their forms were tall and sharp-edged, their armor polished. Their voices were calm, emotionless. "You violated Directive 441, the first officer said. "Yes," Elias replied. "You created an unauthorized burial site," the second said. "Yes." "You encouraged emotional attachment among refugees," the first continued. Elias met their gaze. "I showed respect to the dead." The officers exchanged a brief look. "Human emotional behavior is inefficient," one said. "It creates instability." "Or it creates trust," Elias said. "Trust is irrelevant," the officer replied. "Order is the priority." Elias took a breath. "You have order," he said. "What you don't have is peace." Silence followed. "You will remove the grave," the officer said finally. "No," Elias replied. The word echoed in the small shelter. Refusal to comply carried consequences. Everyone knew that. The officers studied him. "You are aware of the penalties?" "Yes." "Very well," the officer said. "We will review this matter." Elias was dismissed. Outside, Mara was waiting. "That was fast," she said. "They want the grave gone," Elias replied. "And you said no." "Yes," she exhaled slowly. "You humans are strange." Elias smiled faintly. "So I've been told." That evening, the grave changed again. Someone placed a small bowl of water beside the stone. Someone else left a hand-carved symbol Elias did not recognize. A human refugee added a folded piece of cloth with a name stitched into it. The tree's branches rustled softly in the dry wind. Kesh stood in front of the grave and spoke quietly. Elias stayed back, giving him space. "I told them you are brave," Kesh said to the earth. "I told them you kept your promise." When Kesh turned, his eyes were dry but steady. "Why are they doing this?" he asked Elias. "They did not know my sister." Elias thought for a moment. "Sometimes," he said, "people don't honor the dead because they knew them. They do it because they understand the loss." Kesh nodded slowly. On the 5th day, a rumor spread through the camp. The coalition planned to clear the grave by force. Fear returned, sharp and familiar. Some refugees stayed away from the tree, afraid of punishment. Others came anyway, standing at a distance, watching. Kesh did not leave. Elias stood beside him. A patrol unit approached in the late cycle. Drones hovered. Soldiers advanced in controlled steps. Their leader raised a hand. "Step away from the burial site," the officer ordered. Elias did not move. This site violates coalition law, the officer continued. Remove yourselves immediately. Kesh stepped forward. Elias' heart jumped. Kesh, it's okay, the boy said quietly. He looked up at the towering officer. His voice shook but did not break. My sister is here, Kesh said. She saved my life. I asked this human to help me. He did. The officer paused. She has a name, Kesh continued. Her name is Lyra. Around them, more refugees gathered, not close enough to threaten, close enough to witness. She deserves to rest, Kesh said. Please. The silence stretched. The officer lowered their hand. We will report this, they said stiffly. No action will be taken at this time. They turned and left. A breath went through the crowd, shared and shaky. That night messages spread beyond the camp. Humans working on other worlds heard about a grave that was not allowed to exist, about a boy who asked for dignity, about a human who said yes. Quiet memorials appeared. Names were spoken. Stories were shared. The coalition's data systems flagged a pattern. Increased emotional cohesion among refugee populations, increased resistance to dehumanizing procedures, increased attention from human networks. They labeled it a concern. Elias sat by the grave with Kesh as the artificial night settled in. Are they going to take you away? Kesh asked. Maybe, Elias said honestly. Kesh was quiet for a long time. Then he said, if they do, will you still remember her? Elias looked at the tree, at the offerings, at the soil that held a brave girl who had protected her brother until the end. Yes, he said, I will. Kesh leaned against him and closed his eyes. Far above the planet, coalition observers watched data streams shift in ways they did not fully understand. They saw one grave. They did not yet see the roots spreading beneath it. The sixth day began with tension sitting heavy over the camp. It was not loud or violent. It was quiet in a dangerous way, like the air before a storm that never showed clouds. Elias felt it as soon as he stepped outside his shelter. Conversation stopped when coalition drones passed overhead. Refugees moved with careful purpose, eyes lowered but bodies turned slightly toward the tree at the edge of the camp. The grave had become more than a resting place. It had become a question. Elias walked with Kesh beside him. The boy no longer clung to his jacket, but he stayed close. His steps were steadier now. He slept through the night. He ate more. Grief had not left him, but it had changed shape. At the grave, new offerings waited. A braided cord made from plant fiber. A smooth shard of crystal that caught the artificial light. Someone had cleared the ground in a careful circle, as if marking a boundary. Elias crouched and examined the marker stone. A symbol had been carved into it overnight. Simple lines. A meaning he did not know. What does it say? Elias asked. Kesh studied it. It means remembered, he said, but also protected. Elias swallowed. Across the camp, coalition command was not quiet. Analysts reviewed reports and data streams, emotional clustering. Decreased obedience to processing schedules. Increased interspecies cooperation without authorization, all traced back to one variable, a human. They pulled footage. Elias digging with his hands. Elias standing between soldiers and a grave. Elias listening while a child spoke. One analyst tilted their head. Why does this create instability? Another responded, because it spreads. Spreads what? Meaning. That word appeared in the report, flagged as unclear. By midday, Elias was summoned again. This time, the shelter held more officers. One human liaison stood at the back, silent, tense. You have inspired noncompliance, the lead officer said. I have inspired people to care, Elias replied. Care leads to disorder, the officer said. Disorder leads to conflict. Only when dignity is denied, Elias said. The officers did not like that answer. You will be reassigned, one said, immediately. And the boy, Elias asked. He will be processed according to protocol. Elias' jaw tightened. He is not cargo. He is a minor alien refugee, the officer replied. Classification clear. Elias took a breath. Then reclassify me too. The room went still. You will step aside, the officer said, or you will be removed. Elias stood. Then remove me. He turned and walked out before they could respond. Word spread fast. Humans in the camp gathered quietly, not in protest, in support, medical workers, engineers, pilots grounded between assignments. They did not block paths or raise voices. They stood near the grave, near the tree, near a child who had lost everything. Kesh watched them arrive, confused. Why are they here? Because humans, Elias said softly, do not walk away from graves. The coalition responded by increasing patrols. Drones multiplied. Soldiers formed visible lines. Still, no one moved to destroy the grave. The decision stalled at higher levels. Elsewhere in the galaxy, the story escaped. A human dock worker heard it from a cousin stationed on the processing world. He shared it quietly. A human teacher told it to students during a lesson about history. A human pilot carved a name into a scrap of metal and placed it beside her console. Lyra. The name appeared again and again. Coalition networks struggled to contain it. Human networks did not try. On the processing world, a delegation arrived on the 8th day. Senior officials. Observers, a single being whose species had ruled the coalition for centuries. They walked to the grave. The crowd parted without being told. The senior official studied the tree, the offerings, the stone. Their voice was calm. Why this one? They asked Elias. Elias answered simply, because he asked. The official turned to Kesh. Why did you choose him? Kesh looked up, unafraid. He looked at me, he said, not at what I was. The official was silent for a long time. Your species, they said to Elias, creates problems. Elias nodded. Yes. You disrupt order. Yes. You make others question rules they once accepted. Yes. The official looked at the grave again. Why? Elias thought carefully. Because rules that erase people are broken, he said. And humans are very bad at pretending otherwise. That answer traveled far. The coalition delayed its response. Meetings followed meetings. Data piled up without conclusions. Meanwhile, life around the grave continued. Refugees sat together, shared stories, taught each other words. Kesh learned human letters by tracing them in the dirt. Elias learned alien songs meant for mourning and healing. The grave became a place where people remembered who they were before war made them numbers. That frightened the coalition more than weapons ever had. On the 10th day, an order came down. The grave would remain. Officially, it was labeled a temporary cultural exception. Unofficially, it was a surrender. The announcement was quiet, but the effect was not. A sound passed through the camp. Relief, gratitude, something close to joy. Kesh smiled for the first time. Elias felt his knees weaken and sat beside the tree, letting the moment wash over him. But consequences did not end there. Coalition analysts recorded a shift across multiple worlds. Refugees demanded burial rights. Humans supported them. Some alien species joined in. The pattern repeated. One grave had taught millions that the dead mattered. Coalition leadership asked a final question. Why are humans like this? No one had a good answer. Elias received notice of reassignment, not removal, promotion. He was to serve as a liaison between humans and displaced alien populations. He accepted on one condition. Kesh came with him. The condition was approved. On their last night at the grave, Elias and Kesh stood together beneath the tree. We're leaving, Elias said gently. Kesh nodded. She will stay. Yes, Elias said, but she won't be alone. They placed fresh stones, said her name one more time. As they walked away, the tree rustled softly, roots deep in the soil. Far beneath the ground, unseen and unstoppable, those roots spread. The galaxy would feel them soon. The transport ship lifted from the processing world at dawn cycle, its engines humming softly. Elias stood at the viewing panel with Kesh beside him. The boy pressed his face close to the glass, watching the gray land fall away. Somewhere below, the lone tree and the small grave became a dot, then vanished. Kesh did not cry. "She will be okay," he said quietly, as if reminding himself. "Yes," Elias replied, "she will." The ship joined a stream of traffic heading toward the Coalition's inner systems. Elias had been reassigned as a liaison, a role meant to calm tensions, explain rules, and keep humans from causing further complications. It was a polite way of saying he was being watched. Kesh was listed as his dependent. The paperwork called it a temporary humanitarian exception. Temporary, Elias knew, often meant fragile. Their destination was a central transit station, a massive structure where refugees from dozens of worlds were processed before relocation. If the processing world had been a scar, this place was a machine built over many scars. When they arrived, the scale overwhelmed even Elias. Towers curved inward like ribs. Lights moved in endless patterns. Voices echoed in hundreds of languages. Kesh froze. Elias knelt. "It's big," he said, "but you're not alone." Kesh nodded and took his hand. Word had arrived before them. Human workers recognized Elias. Some nodded, some smiled. A few touched their chest in a quiet sign of respect. Aliens watched too, curious and cautious. Within hours, Elias was called to a briefing chamber. Coalition officials waited, their expressions neutral. "You are here to stabilize," one said, "not inspire." "I will do both," Elias replied. The official's eyes narrowed slightly. "You will follow Coalition policy." "I will follow conscience," Elias said calmly. Kesh sat in the corner, drawing shapes on a pad. He listened more than anyone realized. The transit station ran on efficiency. Lines moved fast. Decisions were final. Emotions were treated like errors to be corrected. But humans had arrived in greater numbers now. Relief teams, doctors, teachers, engineers, and they talked. They talked about a boy in a grave, about a name spoken aloud when silence was expected, about a rule broken for the right reason. Refugees began asking questions. Why can humans bury their dead but we cannot? Why are our customs erased? Why is memory treated like a threat? Coalition monitors flagged the conversations. Tension grew. It came to a breaking point when a transport carrying refugees from a destroyed moon arrived with hundreds of dead on board. Disease had spread during transit. Coalition protocol demanded immediate disposal. Families begged for time, for rights, for names to be spoken. The answer was no. Elias stood on the platform as bodies were prepared for removal. Kesh stood beside him, gripping his sleeve. "They are scared," Kesh whispered. "Yes," Elias said, "and angry." A mother from a four-armed species stepped forward, holding a small bundle. "Please," she said, "just a moment." The officer shook their head. "Move aside." Elias stepped forward. "Stop," he said. The platform fell silent. "You do not have authority here," the officer replied. "I have responsibility," Elias said. "If you do this now, you will break something you cannot fix." The officer signaled guards. Humans moved, not aggressively, not violently. They stepped between the guards and the families, doctors, mechanics, pilots, ordinary people. Aliens joined them, slowly at first. Then no weapons were raised, no fists clenched. They simply stood. Cameras recorded everything. "Proceed," the officer ordered. No one moved. Kesh stepped forward, his small voice carrying in the hush. "My sister died hungry," he said. "She died tired. But she did not die alone." He looked up at the officer. "Do not make them alone too." The word spread fast. Across the station, people stopped working, watching, listening. Coalition command intervened. Orders came to stand down. The bodies were moved to a temporary holding area. Time was granted. Names were spoken. Simple rights allowed. It was the first public exception. The coalition could not hide it. News spread across systems, not through official channels but through people. Humans shared recordings. Aliens shared translations. The story grew. Coalition leadership convened an emergency council. Humans were invited for the first time in generations. Elias stood before beings who measured time in centuries and war in numbers. Kesh sat behind him, feet not reaching the floor. "You are destabilizing our governance," one leader said. "You built governance without souls," Elias replied. "That was the mistake." "You accuse us," another said. "I invite you," Elias said, "to remember why laws exist." They reviewed data. Refugee compliance had not collapsed, violence had not increased, cooperation had improved, mental health outcomes were better, long-term stability projections shifted upward, facts betrayed fear. Still, pride resisted. "What do humans want?" a leader asked. Elias answered simply, "To be allowed to care and to let others care too." Silence followed. Kesh stood up. He walked to the center of the chamber, small and brave. "My sister's name was Lyra," he said. "She mattered, I matter, you matter too." The chamber watched him. "If you are strong," Kesh continued, "you do not need to erase us to stay strong." No one interrupted. The council recessed. Outside, people waited, humans and aliens together. Hours passed. Finally, the decision was announced. Burial rites would be permitted across coalition space, adapted to health needs but honoring cultural memory. Refugees would be allowed to observe mourning. Children would no longer be separated without cause. The policy was called the Dignity Accord. It passed by a narrow margin. The reaction was not narrow. Across the station, people cried, hugged, sat down in relief. Elias closed his eyes. Kesh smiled, wide and bright. Later, as the station lights dimmed, Elias and Kesh stood by a newly planted sapling in a quiet courtyard. It was small, fragile, its leaves pale. "They planted it today," Kesh said. "For everyone," Elias nodded. "It will grow." Kesh touched the soil, "like the tree." "Yes," Elias said, "like the tree." Above them the coalition flag still flew. But beneath it something new took root. Not rebellion, not conquest. Memory. And memory, once planted, was very hard to remove. Years passed, not loudly, not with celebration, but with steady change. The transit station no longer felt like a machine. It still processed ships and people, still counted numbers and schedules, but now there were quiet spaces built into it. Gardens where none had existed before. Walls where names were written and never erased. Small rooms where families could sit together and remember. Elias Carter grew older there. His hair showed gray at the temples. His posture softened from years of listening more than speaking. He was no longer just a liaison. He became something the coalition had never planned for, a reference point. When conflict rose, when policy failed, when numbers did not explain behavior, they asked what Elias thought. He always answered the same way. "Ask the people who are affected." Kesh grew too. The small boy who once clutched a human's jacket now walked on his own, shoulders straight, eyes clear. He learned languages quickly. Human, coalition trade, several refugee dialects. He listened carefully and spoke only when needed. People listened when he did. He worked beside Elias, not as a symbol but as a bridge. Aliens trusted him because he was one of them. Humans trusted him because he remembered what humans had done when it mattered. The story of the grave never faded. Children across coalition space learned it in different ways. Some heard it as a bedtime story. Some studied it in history lessons labeled The Dignity Shift. Some heard it whispered by parents who had once been refugees themselves. A little alien boy asked for a burial. A human said yes. Everything followed from that. On the processing world, the tree still stood. The planet had changed. Shelters were gone, replaced by low buildings. The sky was clearer. The ground had been treated and healed where it could be. The grave remained untouched. A protected site now, marked not by walls or guards, but by respect. People visited from many worlds. They left stones, tokens, names. The marker stone had been replaced once carefully when weather wore it down. The symbol for remembered and protected was carved again, deeper this time. Lyra's name was written beneath it, in multiple languages. Elias and Kesh returned there on the 10th anniversary. They stood beneath the tree as its leaves rustled in a real wind, not artificial. The roots had broken through old scars in the soil. Life had followed. Kesh knelt and placed a small object at the grave, a simple pendant shaped like a leaf. "I made this," he said softly, "for her." Elias nodded. "She would like it." They stood in silence, not heavy, not painful, the kind of silence that came after healing. "You know," Kesh said after a while, "some people say humans change the galaxy." Elias smiled faintly. "People say a lot of things." "They say humans are dangerous," Kesh continued. "That part might be true," Elias said. Kesh looked up at him. "Not because of weapons." "No," Elias agreed, "because we refuse to stop caring." They left the grave as they found it, untouched, honored. Back in Coalition space, changes continued. Burial rites became standard. Cultural practices were studied instead of erased. Refugee processing included counselors, educators, and community leaders. The coalition did not become perfect, but it became better. There were still conflicts, still mistakes, still loss. But there was now a shared understanding that memory mattered, that dignity was not a weakness. Humanity's roles shifted. Not conquerors, not rulers, reminders. When a distant system collapsed into civil war, humans were sent first, not with armies but with aid and mediators. They listened, they named the dead, they stayed. Alien species once suspicious of humans began requesting them specifically. "Send the ones who bury their dead," they said. The phrase became shorthand across the stars. Elias retired quietly. No ceremony, no speeches. He simply stopped coming to the office one day and started tending a small garden near the station courtyard. People still came to talk to him. He never turned them away. Kesh took his place officially, though many had already seen him as the heart of the work. On Elias' last day as liaison, the Coalition Council sent a message, a formal recognition. They offered him a title. He declined. Instead, he asked for one thing, that the story never be archived as legend. "That would make it distant," he said. "Keep it human, keep it small." The council agreed. Years later, when Elias passed away, it was not announced loudly, but people felt it. Across stations and worlds, small gatherings formed. Trees were planted. Names were spoken. Stones were placed. Kesh stood beside a new grave, this one human. He did not cry immediately. He placed a stone at the marker and spoke clearly. His name was Elias Carter, he said. He kept his promise. Others repeated the name. Human, alien together. Kesh stayed until nightfall. When he left, he looked back once. The stars above were bright. The galaxy was still vast, still dangerous, still uncertain. But it remembered now, and that made all the difference. Far from where any council met, far from any battlefield, a quiet truth continued to spread. Humans did not change the galaxy by force. They changed it by refusing to look away, by kneeling in the dirt, by saying a name, by burying the dead and teaching the living how to care.